Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Today I've got to deal with a question that seems to be plaguing Twitter, and it's one that Martin, the writer of Game of Thrones, or the guy who wrote a great deal of the books but then stopped very obviously in 2011, asked in bad faith. And he says, what was his tax policy? Well, this is a question that Tolkien actually did answer. And the only reason I'm answering this is I'm tired of people saying Tolkien didn't answer it or it's not important or something. Tolkien did. So I'll read out an essay I wrote over on Substack regarding this, and I will refer people to this Substack post of mine. Now, here it is. Okay, to be honest, I didn't actually want to write this article. The trouble is that Martin's whiny comment about tax policies and Orc Genocide are making the rounds over on Twitter. I myself was asked to weigh in and did so several times. So from now on, when asked, I'll just refer people to this article and save myself some trouble and time. Truth is, this lack of proper knowledge or willingness to go on offense in defense of Tolkien bugs me. Because not only did Tolkien fully lay out Aragorn's tax policy, but he also made it clear what happened to the orcs. What follows is what I posted on Twitter with some minor changes. Tolkien did elaborate on this detail and lays it out quite frankly, but what Martin is doing here is intellectual dishonesty and clout chasing. It was mentioned that he ruled lightly in a letter. Tolkien admits to being of the view that the king should reign rather than to dominate his realm. So that in mind, Aragorn having access to Mordor's vast mineral wealth and resources, and given he made the roads safe for commerce, would thus have had wealth aplenty. And we know he rebuilt the great fortresses of Gondor, those of Arnor, along with the cities of Arnor. We also know that he generally left his subjects to live their lives in peace. This would mean he ruled with a light hand, where laws are concerned, and so he was wealthy like Augustus was after the conquest of Egypt. An apt comparison, I should think. He likely had to fend off Herod and also divide some of the treasures with Rohan. But still, it is unlikely that he would have had a heavy tax policy, given how much of his subjects loved him and how frugal he could be, and how much wealth he had on hand. In contrast, we don't know the tax policies of Bobby B. We have statements that there are those who wish to raise it and others lighten up the burden on the peasants. We have reference to peasants being poor, but also to there being little in the way of suffering in the realm during Bobby B's rule. So we got to keep contrasting statements which confuse more than clarify throughout Game of Thrones, the novel. Whereas Tolkien paints a picture of a realm united, content, brimming with trade and with agriculture, and many years without famine or plague, when comparable to the Augustan period of ancient Rome, or to King Arthur's Lugr kingdom of Arthurian myth. So you see, folks, Aragorn basically marched in, found a generally empty area, claimed the mineral wealth, shared it with Rohan, and also used it to rebuild Arnor and Gondor. This guaranteed peace and prosperity throughout the three kingdoms. What is more is that with this newfound safety, trade blossomed, the economy boomed, and there was little need to tax. This is consistent with Tolkien's outlook about taxes and government. He felt that the king should reign and not rule. That is to say, you can rebrand laws into a new law code, sure, but no regulation and no taxation. And with the wealth won from the War of the One Ring, there would have been no need for taxes on Aragorn's part, as he could live large if he wanted without oppressing his people. That said, as a frugal man, he was unlikely to cost much or to run up a huge debt or anything, or to cost much in terms of household expenses. Likely, if there was an exchequer, it was used more for others than for Aragorn LOTR. Now, as to the wildly foolish accusation of Orc Genocide, the nihilist Martin throws out in his weird attempt to deconstruct Aragorn. There was no such event. It is outright stated that after Sauron dies, the orcs and the Uruk-hai went bonkers, attacked one another, or just simply dropped dead. As instruments of the will of Sauron or Saruman with respect to his orcs, They could not survive without the metaphysical will of the Dark Lord duo keeping them together. As beings corrupted and whose essence depended on the very essence of, say, Sauron, they could not really keep it together on a biological level or sentient level without him, or Saruman, the latter, when his power broke, could not keep his own hordes in control or together. So that there was no orc nursery to be slaughtered. No orcish genocide, as Martin would have loved there to be. Or as I put it to someone on Twitter, a very pleasant and smart chap who speaks, from what I can tell, better English than myself and knows Spanish on top of that. If they're a breed of orc, they fell apart, or were driven mad when Saruman and Sauron fell. They just went mad or instantly died, to my knowledge. Aragorn is a merciful character, but the thing about the orcs is that they could not survive without Sauron, as they are attached to his will in some metaphysical manner. They are products of his will. Okay, now that I've repeated all these statements enough times, let's move on. What Martin proposed happened was simply him wishing to subvert and deconstruct Aragorn, as he despises the character. Aragorn went looking for orcs to negotiate with them, according to Tolkien's notes and appendixes, at least as far as I remember, and instead found a barren land. Aragorn had to make sure Sauron was gone, but yeah, nobody there except the crickets. Funny thing is that Tolkien was troubled by this ending and felt bad for the orcs, and likely longed to rewrite Lord of the Rings to bring in good orcs, or at least to find some way to redeem the race from their fallen status. But he never got around to that, and it likely would have been unpopular and comparable to, in people's minds, to when George Lucas wanted to do some touch-ups on the original trilogy and align them more closely with his novels. But the trouble is, people didn't like that. So one can make the rough comparison here that Tolkien was savvy enough to know, best not touch that. The fans will not like it. And honestly, maybe it would have been interesting had he gotten into those details. But he didn't. And he ended up having the entire race wiped out because of the fall of Sauron. There you have it, folks. This was Aragorn's tax policy and genocide policy. Both of them pretty much non-existent due to wealth gained, and also enemies just dropping dead or going bonkers. Also, to add to this, Aragorn goes, as far as Aragorn goes, he got a sizable dowry, since he did, after all, marry Elrond's beloved daughter Arwen. So there is that to consider, with Arwen also being the heiress to Galadriel, so she would have likely brought with her a pretty good dowry out, courtesy of Granny. As to Martin's own universe, I have one question to ask. What is Robert Baratheon or Joffrey's tax policies? Seriously, I don't know. Robert's is complained about by the likes of Cersei and the rest of the small council as being far too low, but is implied in the Hound's journey north to be too high. With Joffrey maybe raising it, it's not clear. It, I think, is raised, but then is it lowered back down? It seems the peasants are well off in Game of Thrones, but then in the next book, they are stated to be impossibly broke. But then in the last book with King's Landing, it is shown they're pretty content with Tommen as king, and that they've little to complain about. So which is it? Is the tax too high, too low? Does Ned enforce the same tax policy as ordered by Robert? What about Robb? Did he cut up all taxes or raise them? If he raised them, is this why he's so unpopular in some circles? Those who don't care about his marital nonsense in universe? Sorry, but I really don't understand what the tax policy is, nor do I fully understand the laws of Westeros. They aren't clear. Whereas in Lord of the Rings and Hour of the Dragon, we have line after line after line about the laws of the Shire, the laws of Gondor, of Rohan, of Aquilonia, of Nemedia, and so on. It is bizarre that Howard didn't put in as much writing about the law courts of the Hyborian kingdoms, but that we can guess at, pick up on implications, and even deduce more about them than those of Westeros. Same goes for Volusia and the Thurian Age empires and kingdoms. Now, I hope this was educational and that people get a general idea of the overall tax policies as implied and stated by Tolkien and Howard, and that this puts this entire thing to rest. Seriously, I'm getting tired of having this debate every few months. So, if you want to comment in the comment section, feel free. If you have complaints, go complain on Substack. And do follow me on Substack, as I tend to write a lot of articles like this one, and some that never make it into videos over on Substack. So seriously, give me a follow and a subscription there. I could definitely use your support. So have yourself a great day, and like I said, smash that like, that subscribe button here and on Substack, as though you were Sauron taking out Gil-galad.